Hello, welcome to the Wool Winder podcast. My name is Frances and this is my place where I like to talk about all my knitting. Talk to you a little bit also about Hugo the dog here and other things in my life that make me smile. As always, I have finished projects. I've got 2 to talk to you about today, and I've got some works in progress and 2 new cast-ons. I've also got a yarn for a special new project that I'll talk to you about later on. So let's get started today, and what I'm wearing is the Judith Cardigan by Jackie Blogg. And in the last episode, sorry, Hugo's slipping slightly. Have I got a slippy skirt on today? I'm slipping down. Oh dear. So in the last episode, I had knitted the body and the sleeves, and I was just ready to join them together, which I did. And then you're working upwards to create the yoke. You're immediately going into raglan decreases, which you can see I'll do a little close up on these, showing you what the raglan decreases look like. And I had to be a little bit careful when doing the raglan decreases to make sure that I didn't lose the pattern too much. And what I found was when I came to a new section of pattern, if you like, to have 5, and there'd be 2 sets of decreases in the 5 rows. So I would start with 4 extra stitches to allow for those decreases. So you've got two on this side and 2 on this side that you'd be losing, and that therefore meant that you were able to keep hold of the pattern, and those extra stitches would be in the background colour. And most of the time that worked. On the odd occasion it did. When I went back to it after I'd finished, I just went over with a little bit of duplicate stitch. I think I need to do that in 2 places just to get it right. So on the whole, I'm quite pleased with how that line and how it meets up. And, you know, and if you were seaming it, getting it to line up like that would be very difficult. So it's definitely, you know, doing it in one piece definitely allows you to get a better continuancy of the patterns. So that's lovely. So I was working on this yoke. We were down in Cornwall. I said in my last video, I think that we were going down to Cornwall. We were down there for a bit longer than we usually are. So we had 4 nights down there, and we had a lovely weekend. I mean, it was a lovely weekend, but it was a lovely weekend in terms of the weather. We had bright sunny days and cold, clear nights. So lovely for knitting in the evenings by the fireplace. And yeah, it was beautiful. We got on some lovely beach walks, didn't we, Hugo? But while we were there, I ran out of some of the colour when I was doing this, or some of the colours, because obviously the pattern's telling you to do certain colours for certain sections. And I ran out of the colour. I don't know why. I couldn't see from going back that I'd used the wrong colour anywhere else. So I'm not sure. Anyway. And being impatient, I didn't want to wait to order more in, so I just decided to use swap some of the colours around, and then I had a little bit of yarn from my stash that I had brought with me in case it did happen. And I found, so I came all the way up here, and then I found when I got to doing the ribbing at the top of the yoke that I definitely didn't have enough of the grey that I'd started off with on the bottom ribbing. So I went over to this teal colour, which I think I rather like, which looked lovely. And then I realised that would then mean it wouldn't look right against the bottom ribbing, because eventually this ribbing along here after I'd done the steeking was going to be done. So I undid the ribbing at the bottom, changed it over to the new colour, and so what I did was I thread a needle through those bottom stitches of that bottom row before, or just after the ribbing, should we say, because of course it was knitted from the bottom up. And I then redid the ribbing in the teal colour. So I then blocked it. Of course, that's where the magic happens, especially when you're doing Fair Isle, and it really helped to even out the knitting a bit. That's looking really nice. And then it was time to steek. So I started, so I laid it out in front of me. I put some of the blocking boards in between the front and the back, so that there was no needles getting caught up in the back. And then I ran a running thread up the centre. So I identified the centre stitches, and there were 7 on this pattern, and I ran a running thread up that middle centre stitch of the steek, and so just cotton, just running up. And then I did a crochet line of crochet where I was picking up 2 legs, one leg of one stitch and one leg of another stitch, all the way up, and on just immediately to the side of this running stitch that I put there. And the running stitch was to make sure that I'm not moving off from that line, I'm staying on the same line all the way up. And then I got to the end of doing that and I ran up the crochet line up the other side. And then with those 2 crochet lines in place, you can then pull apart the knitting and it's almost like a little ladder appears, and that's what you cut. And of course you do it very carefully because it does feel a little bit scary initially, but it's very satisfying as well. And it leaves you with these 2 neat edges which are then tucked underneath. So it's very satisfying. I almost felt this desire that once I had done that, I think, oh, I wish I could stick something else, because it was a really satisfying feeling cutting up the knitting. And it's interesting because of course it gets all the balance of the 2 sides of the cardigan absolutely perfect, which would be different if you were, or could be different if you were knitting it in pieces. And then it was time to pick up the stitches for the front bands, and again you're looking to pick up stitches along that one line, of course, as you would whenever you're running up a front band of a cardigan. So I put in another running thread along to do that so that I could see that I stayed on, and then I started to knit the front bands. So of course one side's got the buttonholes, and they're very small buttonholes because it's a very narrow button band. It's just a simple yarn over and knit 2 together for the buttonhole. And yeah, it's overall the cardigan is beautiful. The colours are lovely. They're sort of bright without being overly vibrant, so there's a sort of slight mutedness. Are you all right, Hugo? Are you wanting to go down? Hugo's not quite himself today, and in fact we're going to take him to the vets later today. He's just been a little bit, I don't know, probably the last 4 days, not quite right. So we're just going to get him checked over. Nothing serious, but yeah, you're not quite your usual self, are you, mate? So are you going down? Yeah. Yeah. Want to go down? You don't want to go down. Right. Okay. Right. There we go. All right. Maybe shall I turn you this way and then you could look out the window? Would that be better? So, as I say, this is a beautiful, the result is beautiful. I'm really pleased with it. I love looking at all the different patterns and the different colours that work together. And I know I talked about when I was knitting it, how I wasn't sure about all the colours going together and whether it was going to work. But I have learned when I've done things, I quite often like to work with lots of colours. And one thing I have learned on that is not to be too opinionated about whether I think, because I'm not a lover, for example, of pink. You wouldn't see me knit a whole garment in pink. It's just not one of the colours that I would wear. And so whenever I put these colours I'm not quite so comfortable with into things like this, I'm like, is it? But it works. It would, I wouldn't change any of it at all. There is just one thing I would change, because unfortunately, and it's probably not too obvious on camera, but unfortunately the sleeves are too long. You are going down, are you? So, as I was saying, the sleeves are too long. So let me just show you. Yeah. So there, I think I probably need to lose 2 of these sections of pattern. I think what I'm going to do a bit of sweater surgery. Run a line through here and a line through here, take this section out and then graft these 2 back to each other. It's either that or I could just pick up the stitches here and then knit the rib. So I'm not quite decided which way I'm going to do it, but it definitely does need to be done. It's just, and it's a shame because it's such a beautiful cardigan, so just to have that not quite right. And I think what happened, so I did measure the sleeves because I've got short arms, and so I'm always careful about what length of sleeve I'm doing. And I measured it and I thought, well, that's interesting. It's only slightly too long for me. So I did take out a section of pattern, just one of those sections of pattern. But I did think that's interesting because I usually have to lose quite a bit more off a sleeve. But I measured it from the underarm, but you can see, of course, it's quite loose. It's not fitted on the underarm, and therefore actually the underarm is around here, because it's meant to be a boxy cardigan. And in fact, in all honesty, I don't even think it's quite as boxy on me as it is on the model. So that's where I think I went wrong in the measurements for the sleeves. So there we are, lesson learned. Difficult to know how, obviously if you are measuring, how would I have prevented that from happening? Because it would have been difficult for me to anticipate. I guess really when I got with the sleeve here, I could have married the two up. I'm just trying to think how I could have, but yeah, it would have been difficult because all you had was that body section. So I'm trying to be wondering how I could have been a little bit more accurate. With hindsight, the one thing I could have foreseen was that perhaps I should have expected the sleeves to have been a bit longer, and maybe I should have cut out. And if I'd have cut out one more section of pattern, it probably would have been okay. So anyway, that's I'm not going to do any more post-mortem on it. It needs to be done. If you've followed me for a while, you'll know that I'm not adverse to a little bit of sweater surgery. If something's not right, then I will undo it. And as I said, I've already undid the bottom rib, and that took me no time at all. And I generally find that my feeling is that if it's not right, it will bother me. And I know certainly with the sleeves being too long, I'll end up not going out and wearing it because it will be impractical. So it's just got to be done. So what I didn't show you actually, let me just turn around and I'll probably actually show a close-up photo as well, is here is the steeped edge along here, and you actually can't see, again, well you would have seen from the photos we were showing earlier, the crochet line is just in there, and I have just slip stitched it down just to tuck it under there. Some people put a nice bit of ribbon over the top or something like that. I don't really know it needs that. There definitely is the option to do that. I don't know in this situation that it needs it, but I'm really pleased with the result. Definitely I would do more steep things. And it also has got me thinking, I know I've got another furry cardigan that I would like to do, but it's knitted in pieces, and I'm thinking, well, could I convert that into knitting like this was from the bottom up, knitting that in one piece and then doing the sleeves and then attaching them, and yeah, it's just getting me thinking about whether I could do that and then have it and steek it at the end, because knitting furry in the rounds, so you're only got your knitted rows and there's no purl rows, it definitely does make it easier. I'm perfectly capable of doing furry on the purl side, but it's a little bit more fiddly, that sort of switching from one to another, and it's more meditative knitting when you're only doing knit stitches. When you're doing furry, I think it's a lot more meditative. So yeah, that's a thought for going forward. Anyway, you know what I'm like, I'm always planning far too much, far more than I'm ever going to have knitting time to do. So that is my Judith cardigan. It also needs buttons, and they're just little tiny ones. It needs 7 little tiny ones, and I have ordered them. So hopefully if they work, I hope I'll be able to show you in either the next episode or the episode after that when I get to doing it. I'll show you the shortened sleeves on the cardigan and the buttons on it as well, and then you'll be able to see it completely finished. So on to my next finished item, which is my last of the collection of traveller cowls that I've been doing. This one was on smaller needles because it was knitted in sock yarn, so it took quite a bit longer, and it's knitted with the yarn left over from my tessellated cardigan, also by Andrea Mowry. So it's the traveller cowl here by Andrea Mowry, and of course the tessellated cardigan is by Andrea Mowry as well. So this is to show you, it's interesting, we were talking about actually how difficult it is to appreciate the textures, and like you can see there's the haze on this one as well. So it is really beautiful, and you see it's interesting how it's quite long, and yet when you pop it on, it'll scooches up and gives you that lovely effect. It feels really nice and soft. It's got this lovely I-cord edging at the end, and you can see what I've done with the pattern. I've alternated using the I've had three different yarns that I used for this that were left over from my tessellated cardigan. I bought too much yarn for my tessellated cardigan because I erred on the side of caution because I was buying it at a yarn show, and hence why I had enough to do this, and I've still got a little bit left, probably enough to do a hat or something. So it was knitted with, this is from, it's a sock yarn, it's a superwash merino, if I remember rightly, and it's from Debonair Yarns, which are based in Rutland in the Midlands in England. So you've got this colour as the main colour, and then you've got this one with the which is the colour changing one, and then this is the fluff, and the fluff was from Fibre Fox. So, and then what you've got is you've got alternating, you've got the main yarn, then you've got one line of the fluff from Fibre Fox, then you've got the colour changing yarn there, then you go back to the fluff, and then the main colour, and so forth. So in between the colour changing yarn and the main colour yarn, you've always got a line of the fluff. And as you can probably see from what I've got left, I did end up cutting that fairly fine. There is just, well, I've seen worse, but yeah, that was just enough. There won't be much I'll be able to do with that tiny little bit that I've got left. So really pleased. Feels really nice to wear. It's because it is a thinner yarn. It's not as thick and warm as some of the other ones where, like, I knitted the Pebble, the one in the Rowan Pebble Island, which was it's like a worsted weight, and it's thick and heavy, whereas this feels lighter, so perhaps more suitable for wearing in the spring. So beautiful. Very, very pleased with that. So back in my Judith cardigan, and I've just checked on Hugo, who's curled up and having a little sleep. So he's fine, and I've brought over some of my works in progress. So still on my needles at the moment is what I'm calling my rainbow Seaglass jumper. It's using the shape of the Seaglass pattern by Wool and Pine, I think, and I'm using a sort of variation of the Colourwork pattern that they use on there to show off a box of mini skeins that I bought from the Border Mill while I was at the Glasgow School of Yarn show. And let me just, that's the right way around. So here we are. So that's obviously the lovely yoke. I've shown that to you before, but I have now knitted all the way down to the bottom, finishing with a twisted rib. It's interesting, I can see from where I'm holding it up. Let me see if I can can you see just down where my little finger is? From below there is the area that's not blocked, and the bit above, so the yoke effectively, has all been blocked because it was looking a bit scruffy, and it just makes such a difference, doesn't it, on this yarn when it's blocked. So that's coming along really well. And I have started the sleeve. The main yarn that I'm using on here is Rowan's Valley Tweed, which is 100% wool yarn, but it's got a very tweedy texture, and it's very light and comfortable to wear. And I'd almost say it has a slightly almost cottony feel. It's like a tweedy cotton almost. It almost feels a little bit like that. It doesn't feel like wool. And I've got some other things knitted in this, and I wear them a lot, and they don't peel badly. So yeah, it's a yarn that I really like using. An underrated yarn in my opinion, and it's a British yarn as well. It is made in, I think it's made in Yorkshire, but it is, yeah, it's definitely a British yarn, because not all of Rowan's yarns are made in the UK, but that one definitely is. So I've made the twisted rib, and I then picked up the stitches for the sleeve. When I was picking up the stitches for the sleeve, something that's been irking me a little bit, and I'll put a photo in here. I'm just thinking, I think my Waterlands pattern, I get a tiny little hole, just, you know, where you're going from the stitches that were on the yoke, and then you pick up the stitches, cast on stitches for the underarm. And I often get, well, I always get a tiny little hole. It's quite small, and I've done a number of techniques where I'm knitting a couple of stitches together at that area to close it up. So it means it's nothing too obvious. But I just wanted to see if I could get it better, if I could completely eliminate it. So I watched a number of videos, and I particularly liked a video by Chili Dog. There's also Suzanne Bryan and Roxanne Richardson and ones like that are quite good as well. But I found this Chili Dog one the easiest to follow. And basically you have some extra loops, and I'll put in some photos that I took while I was doing it so you can see it. So you pick up these extra loops, and they are the bits that will create the holes if you don't deal with them, and then you decrease them together. And I was always doing something along those lines, but what they were then suggesting that you do is that you're making sure that they lean the right way, and also it's important to have the right stitch on top when you're doing the lean the right way. And I know that one, and you probably know this, it's probably just me that's missed out on this, but a number of years ago when Patty Lyons brought out her knitting books of tricks, I remember her talking about when you're knitting two together or doing any kind of decrease of two stitches together, the stitch that the needle goes in first is the stitch that ends up on top. And that makes a difference to how your decrease looks. So when you're playing around with decreases, it's all very well when you're following exactly what the pattern says. That's fine, because that will have already been worked out. But if you're playing around with the decreases you're doing, or maybe you're doing a pattern that doesn't define how you do your decreases, it's something that you need to, so not only do you need to think about which way your decrease is leaning, but you also need to think about which stitch is on top, and sometimes you need to play around and try it each way to see what looks right. And that definitely also makes a difference when closing up the holes on this one. So yeah, so when you're doing your decrease, whichever stitch your needle goes in first is the stitch that comes on the top. So stop waffling on about that. Fundamentally, I'm so pleased that, look, there are no holes. It's all neat. Yeah, so for me, that is the closest. I guess the only thing I will say is perhaps I can see one stitch is slightly elongated if I was going to be super fussy, but there's no holes. So that's an improvement on that, and I'll probably see if I can work out what's making that stitch elongated. But obviously I've got the other side to do, but there's no holes, and I think that's the really important thing, because you're talking about an area that's sitting under here, so it's not really visible. And I'm saying to you that my Waterland sweater I know has a small hole there. You may well have never noticed it when you see me on here, or even those ladies that come along to my knit group. It's not obvious, but obviously when you're knitting something, you want it to be as good as you can get it. So yeah, very, very pleased with that. It's always good, isn't it, to continue to make progress. That's one of the great things about knitting, is that continuously evolving. One of the things that's interesting about the Seaglass pattern is that there's no decreases for the sleeves. So I've added some in because I wasn't sure about that. I can't think of a pattern. Well, when you're doing a bell sleeve pattern, you wouldn't decrease until you get down to the bottom. But even something like the Judith, where I would say the sleeves are not particularly fitted, that still had decreases, increases even going in it. Yeah, so I decided to add decreases in the sleeves every 8 rows, just to bring it down. As I mentioned before, I've got quite short arms, so there are never that many. It's never that long, so that's the amount of decreases will be fine for me. So moving on, my next thing on my needles is my little squares blanket, which has grown another row of squares. Here we go. See if I can. So yeah, that's coming on beautifully. it's so you're knitting each row of squares with their bands, and then you're picking up the stitches along here to do this band here. But I would say, so it's something I was talking to somebody about, I wouldn't be put off about the mattress stitch. It's probably a good one to actually practice if you're not that familiar with mattress stitch, because you're picking up 2 bars on each side, putting the needle through 2 bars on each side. So it's really easy to stay on track because it's consistent like that. You're not having to sort of, you know, get around or make one side match up with the other or anything like that. So it feels very rhythmic, so it's very nice to do, and I'm really enjoying doing that. Following on from the success of my first Nola cardigan, which was the yellow one that I showed you last time with the sort of terracotta flowers, I've cast on another one, which I did talk about, didn't I, in my last video. So yeah, I was itching to get on and get that cast on, so, and I had the yarn for it, so I've done that. This time I'm looking for a more dressy sort of evening type cardigan, and so I've knitted it in a navy. It's knitted in Rowan Island blend and Kid Silk Haze, so you've got this lovely halo to it, and then the white flowers are in Rowan's Kid Classic, which is like a sort of Aran weight yarn. And as I mentioned before, this is, I think it calls for is it a bulky yarn or an Aran weight yarn? And I've just found by holding a double knit and the mohair together that I can achieve tension. And obviously if you can achieve tension, then you know it's going to knit up to pattern, as obviously as long as you're happy with the fabric. So here we go, let me show you what I've done. I'm really rather loving this. So it's knitted from the top down. So you start by knitting a small section of the band, and then you put those on hold. You go back to where you started and you pick up the stitches and you go the other way. Now I had made a note to myself on the first one that if I did it again, and I thought I might, to do a provisional cast on, but somehow cleverly I managed to miss that little note to myself until I got past that section, and I just didn't have the heart to go back to it. And the reason I'm suggesting that to myself is that you just have this little line, little seam, you know, where you pick up the stitches, and that will touch the back of your neck, and I thought it would be quite nice, and also it would be quite nice to have it seamless. Probably why I'm worrying about it quite so much when I've got long hair and it gets hidden, and yeah, it's, you know, unless it's more of a sort of textural sensory thing, I don't know. Anyway, it hasn't happened on this one. Maybe it will do if I do another one, but there you go. So you end up with these 2 little bits of band, and then you pick up the stitches along there, and then you're knitting, if you like, from the band around and there, and you're going downwards, and you're making raglan increases. So I think I'll show you a shot of the raglan increases a bit closer, but you've got this line coming down there. So you've got, this is going to sit round like this. So you've got your fronts, then you've got your raglan, you've got your sleeve, and then you've got your raglan at the back. So there's 4 raglan seams going down, and that's where you make your increases so that it starts here narrow and then grows out. Now I've got to a section now where I'm starting to incorporate the first flower on each sleeve, so that's going to sit up about here, and you can see that they're coming on very nicely, and I like the way that the colour is going with the I didn't want an intense bright white. It's just a sort of soft, with the, because I've got a combination actually. I did say, didn't I? I said I was using Rowan Kid Classic, but there's also a thread of Rowan 4-ply Summerlight, which is just a cotton, and that was just to lift the colour a little bit from not being too creamy, too yellow, and that, I think that works quite well. So yeah, it's coming on, sorry, going the wrong way. It's coming on quite nicely. It's really pretty, and because I'm knitting it on, what am I knitting it on, Francis? 5mm needles. it's knitting up pretty quickly. And I found this when I did the other one previously. I was amazed. So I think there's two things. First of all, it's an enjoyable knit. There's a lot going on. You've got the raglan increases. You can see it developing, and then you've got the flowers and what have you. And you do the sleeves next. So once I get to a point here where you finish the raglan increases, then you go down and you do the sleeves, and you do the sleeves flat, and you come back and do the body afterwards. So by the time you get to just having the body, it's, and it's cropped, so it doesn't take long at all. Whittle through it very quickly. So it's beautiful, and hopefully I will have that ready to wear in the not too distant future. Maybe, yeah. There's plenty on my needle, so I won't get to start getting too ambitious about that. My second new cast on is for the Conspiracy of Ravens jumper. I chose to start this with a long tail cast on. I'm not sure why. I normally do a tubular cast on, is that the right word for it? And I decided to do a long tail cast on because I've been doing it for some other things like the blanket and what have you. But I mean, really, I think, yeah, with hindsight, I don't know. With hindsight, maybe I'd have gone back and done the tubular cast on, because there's that little line there, and with the tubular it disappears. It goes like the ribbon goes round, and there's no end, if you like. Whereas that many other cast-ons sort of do create that little line. But I'm being pernickety, and it won't make any difference. And obviously, long tail cast on, it's still got the nice stretch. So here we go. This is what I've done. It's not a huge amount. I've got this in the lovely bag that I talked to you that I bought at the Unravel Festival that I went to last month. So it's got, and again, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? It can be really difficult to really see the depth of and I'll try and do a close-up photo actually, because it'd be really difficult to see the depth. So I'm knitting it in, so the bottom one is from Yarn Tings, and the one at the top, so I'm holding these two together, and the one at the top is, I think it's a Surrey alpaca, and it's from Loom, and the one on the top is called Murmuration, and I don't remember if the one on the bottom had a name. Oh yes, Nevermore, that was its name. That one on there. So she does have some lovely names for them at Yarn Tings. So I'm holding those two together, and then when we get to be the ravens, they're actually going to be quite bright for ravens, and they are going to be knitted in these two. And the one on the bottom again is from Yarn Tings, and the one on the top is from Skein Queen. So they'll be held together. So I'm really quite excited about this project. It is knitting up, and this is what I'm trying to say. It's a shame you can't see it, you can't feel it, because it's really lovely. It's really soft. I've checked, because I'm quite sensitive around the neck, and this is obviously going to sit around my neck quite snugly. So it's going to be a lovely project, I think, and that's what I'm expecting, that it's going to be quite a special jumper, and not something that I'd wear day to day, but perhaps a bit more, going out and that kind of thing, So, and I think it's going to feel really lovely. So yeah, so it's a twisted rib. I'm not sure if I mentioned that we've got along on the top there. So yeah, and this is a stitch marker that was part of a little goodie bag that we got when we did our Woolen Walks tour. So that's that. I'm very excited about that one. On the subject of exciting stuff, my son and new wife have a baby on the way, due in August. So I've decided to knit the Building Blocks blanket by Becca Holm. My son loved Lego as he was growing up. The blanket uses heavy worsted or chunky weight, or you can use double knit held double. And so I'm using the yarn by Pudding by Mrs. Moon. and I'm knitting it, as I say, holding double. I'm knitting it on a 5.5mm needles, and so these are the colours that I'm going to be knitting it in. And I've chosen these colours because they're colours that my daughter-in-law I know likes. My son won't be that fussed, let's be honest. He'll be more impressed by the Lego bits, but by the fact it looks like Lego. But yeah, they're colours that I know she likes, and obviously they're gender neutral as well. So she, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's a boy or a girl. They are going to find out, but they are going to keep it a secret just between them, so that they've share that exciting news when the big day comes. So this is one of the test squares, and it is knit held in the yarn double, so it brings out quite a nice brick there. And what I did when I was blocking it is I squished down the bobbles to make them look less like bobbles and more like Lego brick circles, knobs, whatever you want. I don't know what you were going to call those, but anyway, look more like Lego bricks. And then I decided, I thought, I wonder what it'll look like if I knit it holding the yarn single. Obviously it brings up a little mini version, and this was on 3.75 needles, I think, if I remember rightly. So that's the little, there's the big version, there's the little version. And I may, so I'm going to do this, but I may at another date do one in the small one as well, perhaps as a little blanket to go over the baby's legs in a car seat or something like that. We'll see if I enjoy the pattern, and we'll see whether I've got time to do it, how we go. I think this time I'd like to also knit some other baby items, little jumpers, that card jackets, that sort of thing. So we'll see how much time we have. But I'd quite like to try out some different patterns, things that I've not done before, and some designers. And baby stuff is not something I've knitted for many years, so it'd be quite nice to have a look and see what's available out there. Anyway, so that is my baby blankets. So coming up in my life, I've got another Wool & Walks tour coming up at the end of June. This time we're going to go to the northeast Highlands of Scotland. I'm going to start off in Inverness and then go over to the Black Isle, where I've been before. I went with my dad, but there was nothing yarn related that I was allowed to get away with looking at with my dad. So this time that we're going to be looking at yarn producers and so forth, as well as enjoying the lovely sights and some walks. Then we'll be working our way up the northeast a little bit further. So really enjoying doing that. And that's arranged by Ailey the Thoughtful Knitter. And there are actually a couple of spaces left this tour. Ailey and Martin only have about 8 places. So it's a lovely small little group, all knitters. And last time I found that we all got on so well. There was no fragmenting off in groups or anything like that. We all got on really well with everybody. Each of us got on really well with everybody. So we've stayed a lovely little group. We have a WhatsApp group and we share our knitting and what have you. So it was really enjoyable. We had evenings sitting knitting and chatting and so forth. And on the walks, if the walks concern you, you can actually do as little or as much walking as you would like to do. Last time there were a couple of knitters who just did a couple of very short scenic walks, very nice gentle walks, but there were longer walks available if you wanted to do them. So, there's something for everybody within that. So I'll put some details in the notes about how you can contact Ailey and Martin to find out more information about that, if that's something that appeals to you. So, as I mentioned earlier, we had this lovely break in Cornwall a few weeks back, and it was lovely with the sunshine, but I think it also helped that we stayed for 4 nights rather than the 2 nights we normally stayed down there, which meant that we could really relax, whereas normally you're spending so much time travelling, it's not really quite so enjoyable. And we went back this time to Carbis Bay, which those of you who have been watching me for a while may remember that we stayed in Carbis Bay for 8 months, not this winter just gone, but the winter before. And we went back there for the first time since then, and we parked near the flat and we walked along the coastal path, and it's just glorious, and it was lovely taking Hugo there, and as I said, the weather was wonderful, so we had a really lovely day. Really enjoyed returning to that. And I've got some footage of Cornwall at the end of this video. So coming up on Saturday, we've got a canal boat, which myself and my friend who used to work at the Rowan shop that you may have heard me mentioning before, when the shop closed down, we had a group of ladies who wanted to stay in touch. The canal boats are one of the ways that we stay in touch with this group of knitters. So really looking forward to that. So it's like a mini knitting retreat. We take the canal boat down the canal. It sails along really, very gentle sort of pace. You've got lots of lovely scenery as you're going past. You can see backs of people's gardens and the little houses that are actually the lock keepers' houses that are on there, and the locks opening and closing. You get interesting wildlife, swans, seeing a kingfisher, all sorts of things as you go along there. And then it's just a great pace to be knitting to and chatting with other like-minded knitters. We've then got a weekend coming up in Suffolk, probably next week. So that should be lovely, and I'll tell you more about that next time. And then coming up in early May, we are going to Ireland. So we're going to be taking Hugo over on the ferry, and we're going to be going into Belfast and then up to the Giant's Causeway. We're going to meet up with my son and his wife, who haven't done the Giant's Causeway before, and we're going to do that. And then we're going to drive along, do a bit of a road trip along the west coast of Ireland down towards where they live. So that should be lovely. I've got a number of B&Bs booked, so we're going to be staying different places, maybe 1 night, 2 nights. So yeah, it should be really fun, and I'm hoping I might find a yarn shop or two on the way. So I'll need to do a bit of research before we go so that I know what to look for. And this weekend just gone, we had a lovely trip we met up with one of my grandsons, my eldest grandson's birthday, and we met up with my 2 grandsons and other members of the family, and we went on a steam train, and we were pulled by the most beautiful steam train called the Britannia. But as the Britannia was pulling out of the station, we also saw the Flying Scotsman pulling in, and that was going to be doing trains next weekend. So that was a real thrill, and there were lots of train spotters all hanging around with their cameras waiting to get a shot of that. It's been a little while since I've seen the Flying Scotsman, so it was lovely to see that. So that is me all caught up with everything. I think next time, as we're starting to move towards the warmer weather, can't be ignored any longer, I'm going to have a dive into some of my unfinished summer projects. I got started with a number of bits and pieces last summer that I haven't shared with you because I wasn't podcasting last summer, and they didn't get finished. I think I always feel more of a calling to knitting winter jumpers maybe. So I thought I might get them out and share them with you and make some plans about getting some of them finished. So I'll do that next time. Tell you what else I've been knitting. But until then, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.